Welcome to the Musicians Weekly, volume 25. Today, I want to introduce you to a particularly interesting acoustic phenomenon, but which can be very useful for musical training, or let's say better, technical training in a musical way. So there is something every musician knows, more or less. It's the overtone series. That means if we play one note, in this case, this low G, doesn't matter which note, but the lower the note is, the more of these overtones here we hear. So the richer the note sounds, and the more time it needs to be perceived in its whole range. So when we have very high notes, we don't hear overtones, or we only hear a little bit, maybe the octave or something like that. And that there are many interesting things in combination with that. Of course, the highest note we always hear very clearly, but the high notes, if they are in a harmonic relation, strengthen the low notes. And one of the reasons I will also introduce you today, why that is so and how that is used in orchestration, and not only in orchestration, in the setting and in the use of the registers of a piece of music. But anyhow, first of all, we have this. So as soon as this note is initiated, it cannot have its frequency taken as a whole thing, so it will immediately, when the basic frequency is 1, it will become 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, and every note, with every tone this happens. So this is the overtones. And let's say we have here 200 as the lowest, then we have 400, and then we have 800 here already. 200, we say 100, 200, 400, 100, 200, 400, 800, 1600. So that is how it is. It's doubling with the octaves. But you don't have only the octaves. The first new interval you have is the fifth. So it is 300. And then we have 500, which is, it is the major third. Then we have 600, which is double of 300. We have 700, which is a 2 low seventh. 800, 900 is the major second. And again, 1000 is double of 500, is the major third, and so on. So very interesting thing is, first of all, this gives you an absolute clue of a key to consonance, because all these intervals until here we feel absolutely consonant. Even this too low seventh, it is seventh, it also feels consonant. If you have in a chord a dominant seventh chord, the pure intonation sounds very beautiful. You can just try it with a Rossini overture, and you have these tutti chords, and when you have the dominant seventh, and it is in this pure overtone intonation, it is much less need to resolve it. It's just then a habit to resolve it, but that's something different. So we have octave, then you have the fifth, and then you have the major third. So we have, within the first 5 overtones, we have the major triad. And the minor triad is also included in another way, but this is not directly perceivable. And basically it's not there in the overtone series. But I will discuss this at another time. because there we have the main thing, which is the framework of the fifth, where we can include this third or that third, major or minor, or between. It doesn't matter. It will stabilize the whole phenomenon via the fifth. So the fifth is the first new thing, and the fifth generates then the degrees of how closely related a tone is to another one, and so on the melodic and therefore also on the successive harmonic level. Now you have all these consonances, and then we have from here on what we call dissonances. First of all, this major second here, but in the overtone series, major second, also minor second here, doesn't sound dissonant at all. It will only start sounding dissonant if we bring things that are by nature far from each other, we bring them close to each other. Then we have the phenomenon of dissonance. And that is absolutely a universal principle, that dissonance is if phenomena that are naturally far away from each other are brought very close together to each other. That's the basic definition of dissonance. Now we have this thing that this root note produces all these epiphenomena here. And that is in many ways the key to music in general. So in the way of, if we consider it from the view of spatial relation, we have here the reason for what is consonant and what is dissonant, beauty of tone, and stability. We have stability here. The fifth rooted in its basic note. That is very important. Those two principles, stability and consonance, dissonance, beauty, sounding well, all these things. But then we have also the dimension of time, and the dimension of time is what finally is the difference between a geometrical thing like beauty and proportions and stability, like in geometry. But then what happens to our emotional world when the dimension of time comes in? And that means when we have this basic note, all the others will appear afterwards for us. And that is the reason why we feel the fifth, upward fifth, always instinctively as the future of the basic note. That means as an extrovert aspect, going out from the basic note. The fifth upward is an extrovert interval. And on the other hand, fifth downward is an introvert interval. So that is the source, the main basics of tonality. And then because the fifth is the first new thing, it is also what gives the measurement for all the other intervals. So we have intervals that are related on the fifth upward scale and fifth downward scale. And that is why we have the circle of fifths rooted in nature, not as a convention. But now I speak about, we can explore this phenomenon further, and we will have fantastic results about each interval. We can phenomenologically go into the psychological effect of each interval, upward or downward, and how it is related to extrovert, that means fifth upward, or introvert, that means fifth downward relation. But now we have another thing which is very interesting. So the root note produces all these notes, but then it can also happen the other way around, and that is fantastic. If we play one of these intervals, that means, let's say, so we have the octaves is 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. That is the double frequency. It's always the octave of a note. But then we have some notes between. Yeah, maybe this is what I should explain first. So we have intervals that are created directly in relation to the basic note. That is, the octave is the same. The fifth, the major third, this 2 low seventh, the major second, and then what else? Everything finally comes. So these are created directly from the basic note. Then we have intervals that are created reaching the basic note as a difference in space between this interval and this interval. There is the fourth. It goes from the fifth to the basic note. There is the minor sixth that goes from the fifth to the basic note. And we have the minor seventh that goes from the, not from the fifth, from the third to the basic note. And we have the minor seventh from the third to, from the major third to the major second. These are those that are not created directly. The major second is also created directly. And then we have intervals that are created not in relation at all to the basic note. That means from the fifth to the major third, we have the major sixth. And from the major third to the fifth, we have the minor third. So all these intervals are there, all the intervals that we feel are more or less consonant, but they are not all created in direct relation to the basic note. So we also don't realize they are there in the overtone series, because in the overtone series, we just hear what is happening in connection with the basic note. That means we feel directly the fifth, the major third, the major second, but we don't feel the fourth. We don't feel the minor sixth. We don't feel the major sixth. And we also don't feel the minor third or the minor seventh. These are not there. These are only there when we make music and we go out of this direct relation to the basic note. But now, a real wonder of nature is the so-called combination tones or subharmonics. That's very interesting. If we have this interval of a fifth, it is proportion is 2 to 3. When it is played in purest intonation, for example, by a violinist playing double stops, it creates the root note. This is this one, not this one. It creates the, no, it's this one, sorry. It creates the root note, the 1. 1, 2, 2, 3. So we have, it creates the root note here, sorry. When we have a fourth, 3 to 4, it creates a root note, the 1. When we have a major third, it is 4 to 5, it creates the root note, 1. When we have 5 to 8, it creates the root note, 1. And now, when we have the minor third, it is 5 to 6, it creates the 1, which is a different note. And when we have the major sixth, the major sixth we have here, it's different. Sorry, the major sixth, it creates a different note, but the minor sixth again creates 1, the upper note here. Now, these are really audible when we play totally in pure intonation. That means, for example, 2 wind players or 2 strings or 1 string player playing on playing with double stops. So that's very interesting. We can hear with this simple means we can control pure intonation. Just playing alone or playing together or singing together even. 2 instruments, 2 voices. So that is very interesting for all the people who have some problems with intonation or who fear to intonate in a wrong way. And so this fear you can totally eliminate in the most positive manner, because now you don't try to avoid playing wrong. You are searching for the most beautiful sound, for the most resonant sound that finally animates this low note to appear. And that is absolutely fantastic. You cannot overestimate how important it is. And I worked with a violinist who had some intonation problems when he came, and finally we did a phenomenal CD where it was such fantastic intonation, because he realized that working for 8 or 9 months just on one program and on many other pieces, and we always did these exercises in between. And then you can do very interesting things. You can write a 2-part movement of 2-part succession, just the 2 voices you play as a violinist or viola player, or very high playing cello alone, or with 2 winds or 2 voices. And then you have to play in such pure intonation that you play only 2 voices, but a 3rd voice appears and has its own existence. That means it's a 3-part piece, but played only 2 parts. That's phenomenal. I first experienced that when I heard Celi Bidake in Bruckner's 5th in the slow movement, and there's a moment where we have only flute and clarinets. And for this very short moment, there came these incredible subharmonics. They were simply part of the piece suddenly, nowhere written and nowhere recorded, by the way. So you could not only experience it live. I don't know how well one can record it. When we did the recording with the violinist, we tried to catch it, and to some degree it worked, but only after the engineer had understood the idea and putting the microphones not too close to the instrument, but also not too far to get it. Because when you play the violin, you can directly hear these strong notes appearing. So you can compose a 3-part piece, but play only 2 parts. And then, particularly for violinists, it's phenomenal. You will play in such pure intonation. And you have this pleasure, this joy that you have a 3rd voice appearing all the time, like a wizardry. Absolutely incredible. And I now saw that some recorder pedagogues, they use this method to get recorder players play in good intonation. I didn't know about that. I just saw it today when I looked for some translations from the German into the English about combination tones and subharmonics, and suddenly found out that it is already there in some teaching. But for the violin, I did not really know. Giuseppe Tartini was the man who really discovered it consciously and wrote about it. And so it is always the story about Tartini, the Devil's Trill, the dream about the devil, where he received fragments of the Devil's Trill Sonata, and this story with the combination tones or subharmonics. So the subharmonics are really useful musically. I mean, you can, as a composer, you can use it. You could even write a 2-part counterpoint and then write, or 3-part. It's also possible with 3 parts, of course, but it has to be high enough that we can really hear the low notes appearing. And then there are some conditions. So it can even be done with major seconds or minor sevenths. If it is really in perfect intonation, it will work, and you will have this extra voice. So if I write 3 parts, then it becomes a bit more difficult. There's much more to be taken into account. Then you have a 4th part, or you write 2 parts, and you have the 3rd part, which works absolutely fantastic. So you can write as a composer in the score that these 2 players shall produce this lower note. That would be something new in composition. I didn't hear any time at all that a composer used that device. But it could be used, absolutely. It will have a double fantastic effect. Two players playing and playing in absolutely perfect intonation, and therefore getting the third player, the imaginary player coming out. But of course, you use it for yourself, practicing. And then the next thing you have to take into account is, at the moment you have a bass voice coming in or something in the lower register, it's wiped out. It doesn't exist anymore. So the subharmonics or combination tone will only be audible if there is no bass line. It creates a bass line if there is no independent, directly produced bass line there. But of course, then we understand that many things can disturb the clear audibility and clear shape of the bass line if we have such collisions of subharmonics and really played bass tones. Of course, this is also to be taken into account. And now we understand also that how orchestration works. Like Rimsky-Korsakov said, you have long distances in the lower register, and you have very close. You can compose very closely in the high register. Of course, it's like with the overtone series, and vice versa with the subharmonics. So mainly, I tell you about this today for getting a very fruitful and positive way of approaching perfect intonation, not via avoiding wrong intonation. And then you are always taken away from music, taken into, am I right, questioning yourself and being always thrown out of the stream of consciousness. No, we take it from the other side. We go directly into enriching it. So if it becomes more beautiful and more fulfilling, it also becomes more correct. It's very simple. And that's the best way, the absolutely best and most musical way to get the best possible intonation. I hope you enjoyed this, and I thank you for listening. All the best.